What's up guys? Welcome back to another college advice video. This time I'm going to be talking about college advice that you shouldn't follow.
Let me give you some advice. Never take my advice.
The summer before my freshman year, I watched a ton of those college advice videos and like what to expect in college. And now that I've actually experienced college for myself, I can tell you that not all the advice you commonly hear is actually very valuable and some of it's just untrue. So here's some college advice that you should not follow, as well as some advice that you should follow instead. By the way, I'm using a brand new camera. This is the Canon SL2 and it's my first DSLR, so I'm still kind of learning what settings do what. So if this video looks kind of weird or different, then just bear with me. Also, let me know what you think of the quality and of the style and like everything, just so I can get some kind of feedback and see if I need to change anything. So without further ado, the first piece of college advice that you shouldn't follow is join a ton of clubs and organizations. Now, no one actually says it like this in their videos. They usually just say something like get involved, and that's actually something that I said in my college advice video. If you haven't watched that, it'll be in the top right corner right here. But the reason I include this anyways is because it's easy to get carried away with joining too many clubs and organizations, and that's something that I definitely did throughout my college career. One example I would give is the discussion leader program, and if you don't know what that is, it's basically kind of like being a TA, but not technically, and you're just teaching a class about like UCI 101 basically. You talk about the majors, study abroad, campus resources, and basically it's intended for like undecided, undeclared students. And the program itself was really great, but the reason I decided to apply for it was because in order to be an RA for the hall that I wanted to be an RA for, which was Ondas, you have to either have been a discussion leader or you have to be one at the same time you're going to be an RA. I was applying to that program at the same time I was applying to be an RA, and at first I didn't get accepted to be an RA, but then I did get accepted for this program, which I was mainly applying to so that I can be an RA for that hall, if that makes sense. Now what happened was I eventually did get accepted to be an RA for a different hall, but then that completely takes away the main reason I was applying to be a discussion leader. And then as I was going through training to be a discussion leader, I kind of decided I didn't want to do it anymore. But since I was already kind of too far in my mind, I stuck with it. And I just spent a lot of time training for it and then actually being a discussion leader for the following quarter of the next year. Doing that at the same time as being an RA was really, really stressful, and I just wasn't putting in my full effort since I wasn't in it for the program itself, and I just spent a lot of time doing something that I wasn't really committed to. Now, my students were really great. The program itself is really awesome, and I support it and I really like it, but it just wasn't something that I should have been involved in, and I should have left so that someone else who was more committed to it could have gotten that position instead, and my students could have gotten a better experience as well, and I would have been less stressed during my first quarter as an RA so that I could focus more on my residence and being a good RA and on my schoolwork and just taking care of other parts of my life. And there are plenty of other examples of things I was involved in that I just shouldn't have done and shouldn't have stuck with. For example, there was this kind of like video production group that I was a part of for a while, and I quickly learned that it just wasn't the thing I wanted to do. I wasn't really learning anything new, and I was kind of just working on projects that I really didn't care about. But since I had already been accepted into it, I kind of just kept going with it. And the problem with this is that when you're doing something out of obligation, one, you're wasting your time, and then two, you're not fully committed to it, so you're not going to do a good job. So it's actually hurting the group or club or organization that you're part of, because someone else who would have wanted to have your position isn't getting the chance to put their full effort into it, and you're not able to focus on the things that you actually care about. So the way I would amend this piece of advice of join a bunch of clubs and organizations is to try a bunch of things, go to the first meeting of a bunch of clubs you're interested in, apply to a lot of things, but then once you actually have a good idea of what each involvement is actually about and which ones you actually like, narrow it down to a few that you're actually really interested in, and then put your full effort into those and only focus on what you actually care about. That way you'll have a much better experience and you won't spread yourself too thin. So I still stand by the advice that you should absolutely get involved. I think every single person in college should get involved in something, whether that's a club or campus position or some program that you're interested in. But make sure if you stick to it, it's something you actually want to do and not something you're just doing out of obligation. The next piece of advice that I hear all the time in college advice videos, which I completely disagree with, is your RA is not your friend. Don't add them on Facebook. Don't try to be their friend. And this is just absolute nonsense in my opinion. My experience with my RA is that we became really good friends really quickly. It wasn't this like fake, your RA loves you kind of thing. Like, he is probably one of the most genuine people I've ever met, and he has done so much to help me throughout like my college career. It's unreal. I've also been an RA my 3rd year, and I wanted to be friends with all of my residents, and I am friends with a lot of my residents. So I think this advice is just coming from people who have had a bad experience with their RA, and I understand that. But at the same time, you have to understand that some schools are going to be very different. UCI, for example, is just generally a very friendly school, so you're going to expect the RAs to be pretty friendly. You shouldn't go into college with the mindset that your RA is like this enemy trying to get you. And on that note, it is actually harder as an RA if we have to catch you doing something wrong, and that's actually the last thing we want to do, because then we have to write you up, we have to talk to our supervisors, we have to do all this work, and on top of that, we have to have an awkward conversation with you and make the relationship kind of like weird, especially if we're already friends with you. It's just more of a hassle to catch you doing something. So we are not out to get you. And I can speak from personal experience and from my fellow RAs at UCI that we want to be your friend, and we love it when residents interact with us. And in addition to this, your RA can serve as a really, really helpful resource and mentor, because they've been where you are and they can kind of help guide you through your first year, and that's their job. And my RA, Juan, actually helped me a lot with getting involved in certain programs and getting the RA position. He actually went out of his way to put in a good word for me for a program I was trying to apply to and to be an RA. And he helped me with the application process, and I still consider him a very close friend today. So don't go into college with the mindset that your RA cannot be your friend, because I think that's just completely untrue. Even if at your school, the culture is not exactly the same and your RA might not be that friendly, there's no harm in trying. You can try to talk to your RA and be their friend. And if you kind of sense that they're just not having it, then that's fine. You don't need your RA to be your best friend. But just saying that they're automatically not your friend because they're an RA is just, that's just not true. So ignore that advice completely and try to get on your RA's good side, because your RA can not only be your friend, but they can also be really helpful as a resource and as a mentor. The next piece of advice that's pretty commonly said in these types of videos is don't talk about high school, just leave it in the past, no one cares. And while I understand where this is coming from, I wouldn't say completely like leave high school behind and never talk about it. Now, you shouldn't brag about how you were maybe like prom king or something in your high school, or that you were like a star athlete or something, but you can talk about your personal experiences from high school. And I found that these are actually really interesting conversations. And that's because I've lived in Tustin my whole life. And if you don't know Tustin, it's basically one of the safest cities. And basically I just went to schools where nothing like bad ever really happened. I didn't have the same like struggles and experience as a lot of other people did. So I remember my first year, we would sometimes get into conversations about like our high school experiences. And I remember my friends who live next door, if you watch my vlogs, it's Arif, Jay, and Vissel, and they told us how their valedictorian at their school put hand sanitizer in Arif's coffee, and they said how like cars at their school got scratched up, and it was just a completely different world from what I knew. Just from talking to people, I learned a lot about like different parts of the world that I had never even like heard of before, because I've been in this like Irvine Tustin bubble, and it was actually really eye-opening. So I actually think it's really valuable to share your high school stories and experiences, and it's not something you should be afraid to like talk about, because when I watch all these college advice videos, I could imagine it making a lot of people hesitant to ever mention high school at all, because of how like often you hear don't talk about high school, don't talk about high school. So you definitely can talk about it. I think where most of these people are coming from is you shouldn't brag about high school, because once you get to college, everyone is on like kind of the same playing field. Everyone kind of worked to get there, so it's a lot more competitive, but you still can definitely talk about it. So I wouldn't take this piece of advice at face value. Next piece of advice you should not follow is, if you're undecided, get your GEs out of the way. And this isn't something I hear in videos a lot, but I have heard people say this in person, and I think it's pretty bad advice for several reasons. Now, one of them is that if you know what major you want to go into and you just didn't get accepted into it, or you kind of decided like after you already got accepted to your school, then you do want to take those intro classes if you can, because one, you need to show that you can handle the coursework by getting good grades in those in order to get accepted to switch into that major. Two, you might not even like the material in that major. So if you don't take the intro classes, then you're not gonna know what you're gonna be learning, and then you might go into it later and then you decide you wanna switch majors, so then you're even more behind. Another big reason why you shouldn't just take all GEs if you're undecided, undeclared, is because you're gonna need those GEs to fill in certain gaps in your schedule when certain major required classes aren't available. There might be some quarters where you can only take like 2 classes in your major because it might not be available, or it might be full, something like that. And you're gonna want GEs that you still need to complete so that you can fill in those gaps, because you can choose from a lot of different GEs, whereas with major classes, it's a little more like kind of set in stone what you need to take. And if you've already taken all your GEs your first year, then you kind of have like no filler classes that you can add in. So what I'd recommend instead is to take intro classes for a major that you're interested in going into, or if you've already decided which one you want to go into, then definitely take those intro classes, because then you'll get a better idea what it's about, so you can actually decide if you want to do it. And if you do get accepted to go into that major, then you've already taken the same classes as the people who are already in it, and you're not going to fall behind. And one last reason why you shouldn't take all your GEs right away is that, just as a general rule, this isn't always true, but generally GEs are going to be easier than your major required classes, especially once you get into upper division classes. And you don't want to pack a bunch of easier classes in the beginning of your college career, because then it's just going to be hard classes from then on if you get rid of all the GEs. And in addition, you can kind of pick and choose which GEs you want to take, as I said before, because there's a bigger selection. So you can kind of choose easier ones when you have a kind of harder schedule, and maybe if you have a lighter schedule, you can take a GE that's kind of more difficult but that you're more interested in. So it just allows for more flexibility, and you definitely should not get rid of them all at the beginning of your freshman year if you're undecided and undeclared. Next piece of advice you should not follow necessarily, but maybe, is do not room with your best friend. Now, I can understand where people are coming from, because you might have a best friend in high school, but you might not know what it's like to live with them all the time for an entire school year. And you're also going to be in a very small dorm, most likely. So that could make it harder, and it could ruin the relationship. I'm sure there are plenty of YouTube stories of people who have roomed with their best friends and then just didn't like them anymore after that. But I roomed with my best friend since kindergarten though, and we had an awesome first year. We also roomed with someone we knew since middle school, but I wasn't really friends with him. And I became friends with him through that first year, and we just had a blast. So I would say be very careful if you're thinking about rooming with your best friend. You might not know their lifestyle, you might be clean and they might be messy, and you might not be able to spend like all day with them. Just use your best judgment. If you just don't want to room with a random person and you feel a lot more comfortable rooming with your friend, then go for it. But if something tells you you're not going to be able to live with them, then feel free to choose not to room with your best friend. But I don't think you should see this advice and then not consider rooming with your best friend at all just because someone else had a bad experience with that. All right, guys, that is all the college advice you shouldn't follow that I have for you today. I'm sure there's plenty more, but those are the most common ones that I hear and that I just kind of disagree with or think should be amended in some way. So that's it for college advice you shouldn't follow. What you should follow, though, is my Instagram, @KietTheViet. And again, let me know what you think of this camera. I'm still getting used to it, so I kind of don't know exactly how it's gonna look, but hopefully it looks good. If you like videos like this video, I will see you in the next one. Peace.